Hello. So, hi everyone. So, let's wait for another 10 minutes. So, in the meantime, I request all of you to share this link with in your WhatsApp status, Facebook, and other social media as well, so that all other will be get a benefit from these sessions as well. So, it will be also motivate us as well. Okay. And if you have any kind of a question, you can simply ping in that YouTube chat window, and those who are from masterclass, they can ask their question in their WhatsApp groups, and others can simply comment on that YouTube window for now. Okay, so let's wait for 10 minutes, and after that we can start with our session. So I think we should supposed to start now. So let's wait. So without any waiting, so we can simply jump into an action. So today the topic will be angular signals. So let's start with that. So before starting with the session, so let me quickly introduce myself. So good evening everyone. My name is Dhiraj. I'm a principal architect and the technical trainer in Just Compile. So we are constantly delivering output to our clients all over the world from last 15 years. So we are specialized in custom application development, consulting solutions, and training solutions as well. And I'm also a founder of that Angular Masterclass in Just Compile, which is a comprehensive Angular training program designed for all the people's all experience and all the skill sets as well. So if you have any kind of a query, so you can simply drop a mail at trainings@justcompile.com. And if you have any kind of a query, if you want to see what are the contents and all, so we have the website also, which is training.justcompile.com as well. Okay, so let's start with our session. So today's agenda, we are going to let's discuss. So today we are going to discuss about reactivity. So we are going to understand about introduction about angular signals with some demos as well. And we are going to understand why signals. What is the main purpose why we need a signals and how it simply help us to improve the application performance and how it's related to its some kind of a chain detections and all. So we have lots of interesting topics which we need to discuss. So let's dive into that. So now let's understand about what is reactivity. So it's a pretty interesting thing which we are going to discuss. So if you talk about reactivity in context of Angular, so reactivity simply means automatically update, automatically updating of user interface to reflect the changes and simply propagate the update so that UI will be synchronized with your application state. So if you see this GIF over here, so if you think about reactivity, so this is the best example for that. Means the user will be going to type something. So at that time, the state that list will be get filter out. Means that application state get changed. So definitely we need to synchronize these changes in UI as well. So at that time, Angular do all the magic under the hood. So it's run that chain detection ka things and all, and we are able to see the filter list in the UI. So this is all about reactivity. So what is reactivity? Simply automatically update of user interface based on your application state. So now let's try to understand. So we have understood about reactivity. Now let's try to understand about Angular signals. So now what is this Angular signals? So if you talk about Angular, so it's a value that simply notify all the consumer. So what is that? So if you say a signal is a value which is reactive, means it simply notify the interested consumers when it change. So if you see this diagram, so it's depend on this concept system. So where we have a producer and we have all the consumers as well. So the producer will be produce something and the consumer will be going to consume for now. So this is all about signals. So now let's see how it actually works. Let's try to write some code and let's have a fun with that. So it's fine. It's time for demo. So let's go back to let's create a project and let's try to see how it works. So I have already created a demo project so that we will save some time. So let me open that project and let's try to write some code on that. So let's try to navigate inside that project and let's try to open that in a code editor. So I have done that. So now So let's first quickly run that project. So I am simply going to say ng. So let's enter it. So guys, if you have any kind of a doubt, we have that YouTube chat window. So where you can simply uh, add your queries and we can able to discuss as well. Okay. So perfect. So it's working. So now let's navigate to this URL and tada. So we can see our the project has been created and we have simply run that project as well. And by the way, so I'm currently using Angular 17. So that's why I see some kind of a this kind of a UI. So if you are not using Angular 17, so maybe the UI which will be going to look pretty different for now. Okay. So now, so let's write some signal codes and all. So now let's navigate to my app component. So let's go back to your app.ts file. So now let's think how we can create a signal. So there is not a, so let me minimize this. Yeah. So how we can create it? So Angular provide a function which is called signals. And we are going to use that and we are going to create some signals as well. So what I'm going to do, let's make it simple. So let's say I'm going to say a counter and I'm going to say a signal which is coming from Angular core. So let's try to import it. And so if you see, so signal is expecting some initial value. So whenever you're working with signal, so we need to provide some initial value to that as well. Okay. So let me provide that. So I'm going to say, let's say 0. Perfect. So what we have done, so we have created this signal, but how we can consume it? So now let's navigate to my HTML and let's try to remove all those things. So what I want to display the value which we have stored inside that signal. So how we can do that? So let's try to add some kind of let's say h1 tag, and in that I want to display that value. So let's try to say counter. So let's try to add interpret. So now we are going to enter the name of that signal which we have created. So what is the name? So we have a name called counter. So let me copy that. Let me paste it over here. So now whenever you create a signal, so it's a getter function. So that's why we need to add this this round brackets, so that it will be able to get a value from that signal. So now we have done that. So let's save this and let's navigate to the browser. And we can see, so we have successfully created a signal and we have simply consumed that signal as well. So definitely it's pretty boring things for now. So now what I'm going to do, let's try to add some buttons so that we can simply able to change its value. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add some buttons which will be, let's say, button, type will be button, and let's try to add, so let's create a functionality where we can simply able to increment the counter as well as decrement the counter as well. So let's say it will be increment and we have a decrement. So now what we need to create both of this method. So I'm pretty lazy. So I use IntelliSense which help us to create that method for now. So now we have both of that method which is decrement and increment. Now let's say how we can simply able to update the value of the signal. How we can do that? So if you hover on this signals, so it's a writable signal. So what is this writable signal? So this writable signals provides some of the methods where we can simply able to change its value. So we have a method called set where we can simply set a new value to that signal. So with the help of this method, and there is one more method which is update. So this update will be help us to update the signal values. But what is the difference between set and update? So in set, we are simply replacing the value. But in update, we are able to get the current value of the signal, and we can, based on that, we can simply able to change this as well. So let's see how we are able to do that. So let's go back to our decrement and increment method, and let's try to implement that functionality. So what I want to update the counter value, and I want to decrease it by 1. So I'm going to say this counter. So we know that we have one method which called update, right? So let's use that. So what update method is expecting? It's expecting a function. So let's try to provide a function. So here we are able to get the current value, and based on that current value we can able to update its value as well. So instead of current value, let's try to make it a current count. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say current counter minus 1. So we have done this. Let's save the file and let's implement the increment as well. So we are going to increment by 1. So now we have done the changes. So let's save this and let's see in the browser. So let me open that in a side by side, so it will be better to visualize as well. So now we have this increment button, we have decrement button. So when I click on this increment button, we can see we are successfully able to change the value of the signal with the help of update. So now let's see, is it the decrement is also working? So now let's click on decrement, and we can see the decrement is also working. So what we have learned so far? So we have created a signal. We have simply able to change, or let's say update the value of that signal, and we are able to consume the signal in our template file. So with the help of this round bracket. So it's pretty clear for you, right? So if anyone have any kind of a question, feel free to ask in the chat window. Don't worry, I will answer your question, all of your questions as well. Okay. So now we have seen that we have successfully able to create the signal, and we are able to update its value. What are the other things we can do? So now let's navigate to my TS file. So now let's say what I want to store array in that signal, and I want to change its, or let's say I want to add some entries, or let's say I want to add some element inside that array also, and I want to display that array in my UI as well. So let's do that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a signal called, let's say, logs. So which will be going to have some kind of logs with the date and time for now. So I'm going to use that function called signal. So in that I'm going to provide a initial value. So let's try to provide it. So for now I'm going to provide a initial value which will be a empty array, because it's always expecting a initial value when we are working with signal. So now what I want, so I want to use this array, and I want to display all the elements which we have inside that log. So how we can do that? So let's navigate to my HTML file. So let's try to add some kind of let's say I'm going to display a log. So what we are going to do? So let's try to use a loop which help us to simply loop on the item. So don't worry guys. So if you see this something different, so it's introduced in Angular 17. So lots of things are going to change in Angular and lots of cool stuff are get added in that Angular as well. So don't worry, we have planning a session with regards to all the control flows, how we are going to use the defer views and all. So don't worry about that. So for now, it's a simple code where it simply loop on the items and it will be going to create that elements and all. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to use my signal, which is log. And we need to make sure that we are going to add the round brackets. So it's log. So we are going to track with the help of that log itself. Perfect. So now what I want, so I'm going to add some kind of a, let's say h3, and I want to display the value which we have inside my log. So I'm going to use a log for now. Perfect. So now let's save the file. But we haven't add any of the logs inside that array. So that's why nothing get displayed over here. So let's go back to our TS file and let's create some kind of a method, or let's say add log button, which help us to add some logs for now. So I'm going to say, let's say add logs. So in that I'm going to say, so let's say this. So we have a log signal. So now what I want, so we need to update its value, right? So I'm going to simply going to use update. So where I am able to get the current logs, and based on that we can able to do that. So what I'm going to do, so for now I'm going to create some dummy logs. So for that I'm going to say current logs dot push, and let's say new date, and it will be for now, let's say dot to local string. So whenever I click on that button, it's simply going to add a new log, which is a date and time for now. And after that, we are simply going to return the current log. So why it's complaining? So it's expecting is not accepted. So current logs, it's an array of string for now. So what is going on? Why this showing us an error? So if I hover on this, it's an array of string, right? Yeah. So let's save this. So let's try to add one button as well. So which will be going to add a log. So I'm going to say button. So which will be have a click event. It will be going to say add log. I'm going to call that method, which will be this one, add logs. So let's copy this and let's do that. So now we have added this. So let's see, is it working or not? So now let's click on this add logs, and tada, we can see. So when I click on this, we are able to see all the logs which is get generated. So what we have done, so we have created a signal where we are storing a array and we are updating for now. So in this way, what we have done, so we have created the signals with the array, and we are simply pushing some item inside that array, and we are simply display that array in the browser as well. So till now, anyone have any kind of a doubt, so they can ping in the chat window and they can simply ask as well. Okay, so let me have a cup, so have a water. So in the meantime, if anyone want to ask any question, so they can ping in the chat window. Perfect then. So till now, what we have done so far, so we have created a signals, we are able to change its value, we are we have stored the array, we have store some numbers and all. But now let's try to understand more about it. So now, how this all signal things actually works under the hood, means why we need a signal. Let's try to understand. So why signal? Let's see. So so we know that about all this chain detections and all, we have know about zone JS and all. So so what is chain detection? How the chain detection will be get triggered? So we know that the chain detection get triggered when any kind of a browser events happen, or let's say we are simply call a set timeout, set interval, or any kind of a AJAX HTTP request going to happen. At that time, chain detection get triggered. So let's say, so we have this kind of a flow where we have a app component, we have a child one, child two component, and we have a child one component as well. So let's say whenever, let's say in grandchild one component, where we have some kind of a button click event is there. So when user click on that button, it simply propagate the chain detection. So it will be simply marked as dirty. So that whenever the chain detection cycle get trigger, so it simply the mark has a dirty and it simply get updated whenever the chain detection cycle get triggered for now. So now, but what is there is a comparison between these signals and all. Why we are comparing signal with the chain detection, sir? So we know that all about this zone.js and chain detection for now. But how signal works? So if you talk about signals, so let's take a same example where we have this component tree are there, where we have this app component, child one, child two, and the grandchild child are there. So now we have the same example where some kind of a chain detection get trigger on the grandchild. So when you use signals, at that time there is a local chain detection. What is this local chain detection? Means, so if any changes happen on that specific component will be get change only that specific component, not the whole component tree. But how that possible? How we can able to do that? So now let's try to dive into with the example. So we are going to create a same component tree, and we are going to do some kind of code regarding that, which will be going to trigger a chain detection cycle. So let's go back to our code and let's try to do that. So I'll be back to my code editor. So let's try to maximize it as well. Perfect. So for now, I'm going to comment all these things and let's try to comment this as well. So now what I want to create a component tree, which will be look something like this. So definitely we have a app component. We have now we need to create a child two, child one, and the grandchild for now. So now let's create it. So I'll be go to my terminal and let's try to create all that components. I stop the terminal and let's use ng, g for generate, c for component. So we need to create a first component which will be child one. So let's create that. So let's say child dash one. So let's create that component. Perfect. So now I want to create child two component as well. Perfect. So now let's create a last component, which is grandchild component. So let's create, let's say, grandchild dash 1. So we have created all these components. So now we need to create that hierarchy. So where in app component we are using a child 1 as well as the child 2. Child 1 and as well as child 2. So let's go back to my app.ts file. So first thing, we need to make sure that we import both of that component. So I'm going to say child 1 component and let's say child 2 component. So now we have imported. So let's go to my HTML file and let's use that component, which is app child 1 app child 2. So we have added the child 1 as well as the child 2 component inside my app component. So now we know that in child 1 component we are using a grandchild 1 component over now. So let's go back to inside the child 1 component. First we need to import that grandchild 1 component. So we have done that. So now let's navigate to the child 1 HTML file and let's use that component for now. So now we have done all this hierarchy stuff. So now let's clear this. And if I use ngserve, let's try to run this. So let me check if anyone have any kind of a doubt in the chat window. So till now all good. Perfect. So now if I go to the local host and let's see, so we can see all the components are get rendered in the browser as well. Now let's try to write some code which will be going to trigger a change detection cycle. So what I'm going to do, first let's navigate to my child 1 component. So I'm creating a simple function which will be going to provide me a current date time. So let's say current date time method. So which will be going to say return new date. So whenever this method get invoked, we get a new date time for now. So now we have done that. So in child 1 component, I'm simply going to use that method inside my template. So let's say over here, instead of this P1, I'm going to let's change this to H1, and I'm going to call that method inside my template, which is current date time. So now we have done that changes. Perfect. So the same changes, what I'm going to do, I'm going to do inside my child 2 component also. So I'm a little bit lazy. So let me copy from here and let's do that changes in my child 2 component. Let's go back to there. Let's add that method which help us to get a current date time. And over here as well, we are going to call that method. So I'm a little bit lazy. So let me copy from here and let's try to do that changes. So it will be, let me copy this and let's paste it over here. So perfect. So now what I want, so I want something to be get happen inside my grandchild 1 component. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add some kind of a set interval. So what it does, so it will be going to execute after specific interval. So we know that, so when we have a set interval, so it simply trigger the chain detection. So let's go back to inside the grandchild and let's try to do some changes. So let's close all of them and let's navigate to my grandchild one component. So in that, what we need, so let's try to say, I'm going to add, let's say current date time, which will be going to have store the current date time for now. And what I want, so whenever a browse, let's say change instruction get triggered, so I want to show the seconds between that both of the date for now. So let's do that. So I'm going to create one observable with help of that RHS intervals and all. So let's say I'm going to say seconds. So which will be going to assign. So I'm going to use interval which is provided by RHS. So I'm going to say which will be going to have 1000 seconds or 1000 milliseconds. So let's try to add that. So what I want, I'm going to use a pipe. Let's make it a little bit pretty. So I'm going to say map. So don't worry about this, guys. So I'm going to explain this code, what it does and all. Perfect. So we need some kind of a logic which help us to get some kind of a seconds for now. So I'm going to create a simple method which will be going to say get seconds. So what it does, so it simply provide a difference between two date and we are going to get the actual seconds between them. So I'm going to add that. So I'm say let's say const sec difference equal to, so I'm going to say what we can do. So let's say math dot flow. So in that I'm going to say new datetime dot get. So we have a current so minus with the current date time which we have created. So we are going to say get time and we are going to simply divide this value with 1000. So we get the second. So let's do that. Perfect. So now we have created that method. So let's return the value as well. Perfect. So we are going to call that method over here. So let's say this dot get second. So we have created one observable which will have which will be going which will be interval where it will be have a 1000 milliseconds which will be going to get a value from this get second methods. Okay. So now we need to use this observable inside my template. So for that we need one pipe which help us to convert that observable into a actual value which is async pipe. So now let's try to navigate inside my grandchild one component .html. So what I want to display its value. So I'm going to say h2 which will be seconds. So which will be seconds observable and we are going to use a async pipe for now. So now let's save this file. So what we have done so far, so we have created a component tree. So where in grandchild component we have added a set interval which will be going to trigger a change detection cycle and it will be make the component mark as a dirty so that it will be going to update it as. So now we have done all these things. So let's go back to the browser and let's see what we have. So if you see over here, so we can see the second get displayed. But at the same time, if you see all other component also get re-render again and again. Why? Because the whole component tree get marked as dirty. But why? Because all these components chain detection cycles are in default. So definitely what I'm going to do, so we know that, so this grandchild trigger the chain detection cycle. So that's why the whole component tree get marked as dirty and all. So what we can do? So we know that instead of using chain detection as default, we can simply use chain detection on push. So what it will be going to make a difference? So let's see. So let's go back to all the components and let's change its chain detection cycle. So I'm going to say change detection cycle to on push. Let's do the same changes in all other component as well, which is child 2. We have done that. So in grandchild component also, I'm going to add that chain detection. Perfect. So let's save all these files. Let me close it as well. So now if I go to the browser, so we can see the hierarchy. So now see the child 2 component, the date time is not get changed over here. But at the same time, the child 1 component, the values are get changed again and again. Why this happen? Because if you see our grandchild component, the second values are get changed. So what it does? So it simply make our component hierarchy. So what we have done, so previously all of these components are, the chain detection is by default, right? It's using a default one. But after what I did, I simply change all the component chain detection strategy to on push. So that's why the child 1 component not get re-render, but instead, so but all the child 1 and the grandchild all get re-render and all. Why? Because the chain detection cycle get invoked. So that's why if you see, so the child 2, the values are not get changed, but in case of child 1 and the grandchild, both the values are get changed for now. So but what what is the relation between these signals and this chain detection, and what is that local chain detection? So now we are going to see that. So now what I'm going to do, so let's navigate to my grandchild component. So we know that we need to make sure that new value will be get displayed in the browser. So whenever the second gets changed. But at the same time, I don't want to make other hierarchy component mark as dirty. So I don't want to do that. I want to make the chain detection should be triggered only for this specific component. So how we can do that? So now here comes signals. So now what we can do? So let's introduce the signals for now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a signal which is called seconds by using signal function. So let's use that. So in that, let's provide a initial value which will be 0 for now. And let's comment this code which we are not going to use. So in constructor, let's try to add a constructor, and as soon as the component get created, I want to add that set interval. So I'm going to use a set interval. So let's try to add that, comma. 3000. Let's say 1 millisecond. Perfect. So in this set interval, what I'm going to do, I'm going to set a value, or let's say update the value of my signal. So I'm going to use, so let's say I'm going to write this dot seconds second. So in that, I'm going to set a value. So I'm simply going to call the method which will be going to provide a seconds. So let's do that. So now what we have changed, just change from this observable with signals. So now we have done that. So this code will be the same as previous, but instead of using that RxJS interval which providing observable, we are going to use that simple function which is provided by browser, which is that set interval for now. So now let's go back to the browser. So let's try. So we need to make sure that we are going to consume that signal in my template file as well. So let's try to navigate inside my grandchild component, and instead of this observable, I'm going to provide the signals. So we have provided that. So now let's go back to the browser, and we see some kind of a difference between previous and now. So you can see my grandchild component has that set interval, right? But now the child one components are not get re-render. Why? Because with the help of signals. So what happened under the hood? So it's simply make this component has marked as dirty. So it simply skip all the other components. So it simply update, or let's say re-update the grandchild component as well. So this is called as a local chain detection, where only that component will be going to re-render with the new state. No other component will be going to impact it for now. So definitely this has a pretty awesome performance of the application, because we are not re-rendering all other component hierarchy. Instead of that, we are rendering only that specific component where the actual state get changed. This is pretty awesome, right? So that's why we are using signals for now. So how this signals has massive impact on the Angular application. So So this is a reason behind why we use signal and why they have introduced a signal in Angular as well. So signal is one of the popular thing because all other JavaScript framework also using other than Angular as well. So this is all about that. So anyone have any kind of a doubt? So they can ping in the chat window, and they can so we can discuss about that as well. Is it clear for now? Anyone have any kind of doubt? You can ping on the chat window. Perfect then. So now we have seen that we have created a signals. We have seen how the signals will, which is related, how the signal will play a important role in Angular. How these signals are related to this chain detection cycles. What is this local chain detection cycles, and how we are going to work with that and all. So, so now Angular has introduced some of the other functions as well. So let's try to understand about that as well for now. So now let's back to the code, and so now we don't want to use all these things and all. So let's make our life simple. So now let's try to navigate inside my app.component. So for now, in template, I don't want to use that components because we have done with that. Perfect. So now, so in signals, when you create a signals, so let me hide this as well. There is some kind of an interesting thing which we need to think. So this thing will be going to help when you are going to work with objects as well as with array and all. Because what happen? So let's say if you are creating a array of an object, but in that array we are storing the same value, but the instance of that array will be different. So how definitely at that time we don't want to make that chain detection should be get trigger, because it doesn't make sense. So if we have the same value which is get set again and again, what I mean to say is that let's consider we have this log signals for now. Okay, so now in this, so let's say we have some kind of a, let's say log, which will be, let's say log 1. So we have this kind of a log for now, and we have some kind of a method which is, let's say add log, and in that what we are going to do, so we are going to say simply this dot logs dot, so in that we are going to say I want to update the logs, or let's say I'm going to set the logs. So in that what I'm going to do, I'm going to set the same array but with a new instance. So what happened? So definitely the Angular simply understands that the reference of that array get changed. But how get it get to know? So don't worry. So I'm going to show some kind of a source code which is related to the Angular. So Angular is a open source for now, right? So that's why. So when you are working with signals, so the signals provide some kind of a options. So what is that options? The option will be this one. So let me show you. So when you create a signal, we have provided an initial value, and after that we have some kind of options are there which is optional. So what is that option? So when I open that options, we have one property which is called to equal. So what this property actually does? So this property is simply going to check the value which is previous and what will be the value which will be current. So definitely if you see both the array are same, but the reference of that array is that object reference are different. So but definitely how that possible? Because if you see the source code of the Angular signals, so they are using a default equal function. So what it does, it simply compare the current object with the new object. So definitely in our case, so definitely we have a two new object reference, right? So definitely it will be always notify the chain detection cycle, and it will be going to re-render it. At the same time, the values are same. So how we can able to resolve this as well? So what we can do with the help of this option called equal to. So in this options, what we can do, we can simply provide a function which will be going to compare the previous as well as the current value. So what we can do, so we have this one of the popular package called load.js. So this provides some kind of a function which is called is equal to. So what we can do is we can simply install this load.js npm package, and we can simply use this is equal function. If you see, what this function actually does, it actually check the values of both the objects. So if you see, the objects are different, but its values which we are going to store inside that objects are same. So that's why it's always return true. So what we can do, so we can simply install that package and we can simply use that is equal function for now. So what it does, so it simply actually check if the values are get changed, and based on that it simply notify all the consumers which is consuming these signals for now. So these are the some of the use cases with the help of signals. But now let's try to see what are the other functions which is provided when with the signals. So what I'm going to do, so let's try to move this little bit down. So we have this counter signals. So what I want, whenever the counter value get changed, I want to add some kind of a logs in my console. So that is pretty cool stuff which we can do. So we have, let's try to add a constructor, and in that I'm going to add one function called effects. So which is going to provided by Angular core. So in that, what it does, it's take a function as a parameter. So in that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to simply consume that signals for now. So what happen, whenever the value of the signals get changed, so it's simply going to invoke this function. So let's try to add some kind of a console log, and let's see is it able to actually invoke this function and it able to display all that logs for me. So let's say counter colon, and let's try to consume that signals. So we have done this, so let's save the file. So now let's try to uncomment both the function which help us to change the value of that counter signal. So let's try to do that. Let's save this, and in template also I'm going to uncomment both of. So I'm going to display the signal values, as well as I'm simply going to change the value with the help of both of this button. So let me uncomment this. Perfect. Let's save the file. So now if you go back to the browser, let's try to refresh it. I think something is went wrong. Okay, so let me comment this. Perfect. So let's just save the file. So now we have the counter, we have this increment and decrement button, and we have added that effects as well. So now let me open a console. Let's try to clear it. So now when I click on this increment button, you can see that effect that which get invoked, and we can simply able to see the logs which will be get displayed in the console as well. So if I click on decrement, so it simply watch, or let's say listen to that signals, and based on that it simply execute that effect methods for now. So when we can use that, so we can simply use effects when we want to log something, when we want to update your local storage as well. So if you want to have some kind of a use case, at that time we can simply use this signals for use this effect for. So now definitely at that time we can able to do that. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create one more signal inside my component, which will be, let's say, which will be going to what we can do. So let's create a first name signal. I'm going to use a signal, and I'm going to provide some default value, which is empty string. So we have created a signal called first name, and we are simply providing a initial value, which will be an empty string. So what I want, so I'm going to add some kind of a input field, and I want to bind with these signals. So for that, I'm going to import a forms module. Let's try to import it. So let's navigate to my app component. So in that, let's try to add some div, and inside that we are going to add a input, which is type of text, and we are going to add some label as well for now. So we have the div, inside that we have a label, and inside that we have the input as well. So I'm going to say this label will be going to say it's the first name, and in that, so what I want to bind with the value field. So I'm going to use for now ng model, and in that I'm going to assign the value, which is first name, which is the signal which we have created. So at the same time, we need to update that signal as well, right? So I'm going to use that ng model change, and in that I'm going to say this dot first name, and I'm going to set a new value. How we can able to get that? So we are going to use this $ event for. So now let's save this, and in over here also I'm going to add one h3 tag where we are going to display the first name. So first name will be, so let's try to copy this and let's try to provide it over here. So let's save the file. So if you see, so we have the first name. So if I enter some value, let's say Dhiraj, and we are able to see the values which will be get displayed over here as well. So now what we have done, we have created that signal. But now what I'm going to do, I'm going to use that both of that signal inside this effect. So let's see what will be going to happen. So I'm going to say, let's say first name, and I'm going to use that signals. So if I save this, and let's go back to the browser. So now let's clear this. So let's say I want to change the counter signal for now. So I'm going to simply click on this increment. So we can see that effect will be get invoked, and we can see we can have a log which will be get displayed, which simply display the counter as well as the first name value. So in first name, what I want going to do, I'm going to say Angular master class. So you can see as soon as I change the first name signal, at that time also that effect will be get executed. How that possible? Because effect simply listen to all the signals which we have used inside that function. So that's why we have used a counter as well as the first name. So that's why it's know that whenever any of these signals get changed, at that time I want to call this function. But definitely what I want is that whenever the counter gets changed, at that time on, I want to execute this function. But how that possible? So the Angular provided one function which will be help us to do that. So the function which will be untrack. So this function I'm going to provide and pass the signal which we have. So now let's save the file and let's go back to that. Let's clear this. So now when I click on this increment, we can see the values get changed and it get displayed. Now let's say if I type some value inside my first name. So we know that previously whenever we change a first name, at that time also that effect will be get executed. So now let's try to change it. So let's say Angular master class, and you can see no logs will be get generated in the console. But now if I click on this decrement button, we can see the logs which is get displayed also. So in this way, if we have want to untrack this specific signal inside my effect, then we can simply use this untrack function, and with the help of that we can simply able to do that. So we have covered a lot of topics which is related to the signals, but we have some kind of a time constraint as well. So we are going to what we can say, we are going to cover lots of more advanced use case about these signals in further sessions as well for now. Okay, so in the meantime, if anyone have any kind of a questions, so they can simply ask in the uh, YouTube chat window and in that WhatsApp group as well. So if anyone have any kind of a doubt, you can feel free to ask, or else we are done with our session for today. So perfect then. So I hope you all enjoyed this today's session, and I hope it adds some values in your career and the Angular development journey. So we are keep posting a new content every now and then in our channel. So if you are looking for some direct training or consultant, you can simply contact us in this specific mail ID, which is training@justcompile.com, and we do have a website which is called training.justcompile.com also. So you can simply go there and you can simply contact us as well. Okay. So thanks for joining and have a great day to everyone. Cheers. Bye everyone.